What's going on, guys? Welcome back. Today we are doing the SOC Level 2 path. I did the intro to logs at one point. I'm going to do log operations today, and we're going to go through this. I'm sorry my voice is kind of gone, so I apologize. That's why I waited an extra day to record a video to try and get my voice back, but we'll go ahead and get into it. So we've got log operations, and by the way, guys, if you like this content, hit the like, hit the sub button, and we'll get into it. This video does not have any like practicals, so I'm going to just talk about the log operations, but this is one of the most important videos out there in my opinion. All right. So the first thing that comes to mind regarding log analysis is to open the door to the adventure. Yeah, okay. So we don't need to do any of this. This is just telling us about the introduction itself. So here's the biggest thing with logs. Okay, I see this all the time. The biggest mistakes I see are people overlogging and then underlogging. Obviously, there's a sweet spot in every organization that you have to find. And the biggest thing is a lot of the security folks don't know what they should be logging. I see this all the time. They don't know what they should be logging until an incident occurs and they go, oh, we don't have those logs. Or they say, we're trying to find these logs, but there's a million logs to search through. So that's why it's important that you understand this box, because a lot of people think they understand logging, and then a security incident happens and they're trying to do an investigation and they're going, I have no idea how to find anything because there's so much stuff, or we're missing logs. And then the other flip of the coin you get a lot with new people in the industry, especially younger college kids and things like that. They'll say, well, why don't we just log everything, or make sure, or grab these logs and these logs and these logs. That costs money. Understand that when you're grabbing extra logs, it costs money. You have to store them somewhere. So keep that in mind, that it's a fine balance between the business aspect and the security aspect. You have to find that balance, and each individual organization is different. So make sure you know that. So, like it said here, do you dare to configure your logs, or are you happy to be lost in the madness of thousands of lines? So what they're saying is, do you dare to go through and say, hey, I don't want this log, I don't want this log, or do you say, log everything and let's find out when it happens, right? So both approaches have their pros and cons. So these are the different types of logs that the different reasonings for logging. You have security purposes. This is obvious, right? If somebody's in my network, if somebody is doing something they shouldn't be, I need to be able to prove that. So I need to be able to log it and go back and view those, right? Then there's operational purposes. This is what you need to actually know. So if you're running a business, for instance, right, I need to know, okay, this server is using too much CPU, and I need to know that because I need to upgrade the server or whatever, or give it more CPU or more RAM or whatever. Those are operational logs, meaning I need to know them so that I can keep operating. Then you have legal purposes. This is actually one that almost all, especially entry-level security people, they don't think about, and it's not their fault. They're not getting taught that there's compliance standards as well. They hear about them, but they don't understand them fully. And what it is this this HIPAA, GDPR, PCI, ISO, all these things. They're compliance standards, meaning you legally have to log certain things if it's in your network, because if you don't, you can get fined. So that is something that those compliance standards hold companies to. They say, if you're going to process credit card data, if you're going to process health information, if you're going to process financial information, whatever, then you have to do this. And the point of that is pretty self-explanatory. Companies are about money, right? They would say, screw this, and they would go the cheapest route if they could until they got hit. So this is why they hold them to a legal compliance standard. So here's an example of that. A company must have an active central log management system, adequate log configuration, and 12-month log retention. So that tells you right there. Some people were saying, or I've heard the argument before, some people say, well, if you're logging so much data that it's costing you a bunch of money, just don't hold the logs as long. Hold them for 6 months or something like that. So that way, but right there, legally, you have to hold them for 12 months for certain compliances. So that's where you're playing that balance game. It's a very complex game. And this is where I see a lot of security folks get kind of discouraged, because they have these ideas, but they have to match them with compliance and standards, or else they can't use them. So keep giving those ideas, because you never know which ones actually work. So if you see something and you go, hey, well, let's do this, try it, or ask, and if they say, hey, that will be out of compliance, then okay, now I know. But don't give up on trying to be more efficient and be more productive. Okay, so logging and configuring for debug purposes usually planned. Yep, so to boost the system's reliability. So this is to tell us when things are going wrong in the system so that I can actually fix them. So which of the given log purposes would be suitable to measure the cost of using a service? So for instance, like AWS, they log how much it's costing you if you have a business account, how much it's costing you to do whatever, right? That's a log. So they're saying, because they're going to tell you this is how much CPU you're using, how much RAM you're using, how much network bandwidth, all that stuff. So that's an operational log. Now, which of the given log purposes would be suitable for investigating log application logs for enhancement stability? So let's say our application's running really slow. We're trying to figure out what's going on with it, right? Is something going on? If it is, then we're looking at debug logs. So that's the difference between those two there. Now, where to start and what to do after deciding log purposes. This is where you got to start asking those questions. And especially if you're a small company standing something up, or if you're even a mid company or a large company that's been around for a long time, re-ask these questions, right? What will you log and for what? So what's the scope of the logging that you're doing? How much are you going to log? So how detailed are those logs going to be? Are you going to just get the IP of the source and the destination, or are you going to get the IP, everything in the packet, like everything, right? How much do you need to log? So how much do you legally need to log? That's what I'd be asking there. We have to know at least our minimum standard so we know where we're at. How are you going to log? Where are you going to collect all these? What's your SIM look like? How are you going to store collected logs? So do you have some sort of database that you've already got stood up? Is there a standard process, litigation, or law? So do I need to store them for 12 months? If I do, I know now that my requirements for that server is for that database is much larger, because I have to store them for 12 months. Or am I going to rotate them out every month? What am I going to do? How am I going to keep them stored for 12 months? How are you going to protect the logs? So are you going to encrypt them at rest? Are you going to encrypt them in transit? What are you going to do? How are you going to keep them protected? Are you going to keep them off site? Are you going to keep the backups in a safe? Like, how are you going to protect them? How are you going to analyze the collected logs? So let's say you do have the backups off site. Okay, how do I analyze those now? I need to be able to bring them back and analyze them if I need to. So do I have a SIM that has that capability to reach back 12 months? If I do, okay, there you go. Do you have enough resources and workforce to do logging? So this is where not only do you have enough physical resources from computing, from RAM, all that stuff, do you have the workforce? Meaning, do I have enough people that if logging is that big, right, can they analyze them? If not, then we're logging too much stuff, right? Do you have enough budget to plan, implement, and maintain logging? So did I plan for the cost to continue to grow as the logging gets bigger? If my company expands, right, logging is going to expand. Am I planning for that? Am I budgeting for that? So you're a consultant working for a growing startup. As a consultant, you participate in a log configuration planning session. The company you work for is working to get compliant to PCI. Okay, the question is discussed. What questions answer as much as mentioned in the PCI requirements? So that's how much do you need to log? How much do you need to log? Right? As much as they mention in the PCI requirements. That's how much we have to log, right? So that tells us at least our minimum. Okay, so now we have configuration, dilemma, requirements, aspiration, resource, and investment. So this is where basically you're going to run into this dilemma, right? Okay, we have our requirements. We have our aspirations, what we'd like to log, right? Everybody would like to log everything. And then resources and investment, how much are we going to put into that? So here's our base requirements. What happened? When did it happen? With time, date. Where did it happen? Who caused it? And from what source? Well, here's things we'd like to have. Is it possible to have more data? More details? So is it possible? Is the application give you logs that actually produce more details? How sure can I be this is true, right? Is there any way of validating this besides this one log? What is affected? Okay, so if they took that, or if they access that file, what's affected by that? What will happen next? Is there anything else that requires attention? And what should I do about the incident? All of those are things that if you could log everything, if you could see it, you could start to see, build out what's going to, all these questions, what's affected, what's going to happen next, all that stuff. But those are proactive. This is reactive. Now, the point of that is you need to have this at a minimum so that you can actually react to incidents. These are things that you would like to get to, but you have to have a good logging foundation, and you have to have the budget and the workforce and all that stuff. So you can see the base part heavily relies on incident detection mindset. So this is exactly what it is. The aspiration part is more focused on threat hunting. So that is where I see a lot. Hey, I'm trying to validate this, but it doesn't have this, right? Well, that's because the logging is not up to that standard. If you want the logging up to that standard, you have to plan for it. You have to budget in advance that, hey, we're going to increase our logging because we want to do more threat hunting, but that's going to cost us because we have to store those logs in the back end, right? And then you might get a lot of business pushback that says, hey, we don't want to do that because according to the compliance standards, we have to hold those logs for 12 months. We don't want to hold those logs for 12 months because it costs us a lot more. So we only want the bare minimum logs. Those are the things that you're going to run into when you're trying to do this stuff. Okay. The session continues and your teammates need your help. They will negotiate for logging, budget, and operational details. As a consultant, you must remind them of a vital point. Which requirements are non-negotiable? And if you look right here, non-negotiable are operational and security. Boom. Okay. So logging principles. So here is the logging principles. It's a process, multiple principles which help achieve the mentioned goal. Here's the principles. Collection. Define the logging purpose. Collect what you will need and use. Do not collect irrelevant data. It doesn't help you to collect a bunch of irrelevant data. It doesn't. Don't collect it, because that's where you start running up your budget really fast and screwing yourself. Avoid log noise. That's the same thing. Format. What format is it going to be in? Are they all in the same format? Because they should be. All your logs should be able to come into a sim and be able to be one format, so you're viewing them and knowing exactly what's going on. If you're having to open up a log and every time you open it, you're going, okay, let me figure out what's going on here, that's a problem. Because if an incident occurs, you're talking minutes. Minutes may not seem like long, but that's minutes that an attacker is in your network messing around. So you need to be able to view those at the same time. Here's another one I see all the time. Ensure the timestamp logs are accurate and synchronized. Meaning, make sure all the logs, especially if your business spread out, make sure all the logs are coming in and they're all being synchronized with the same time. So when I'm looking at that log, I go, 4 p.m. That means the same thing as 4 p.m. on any other log, because otherwise your investigation is going to get really hard, really fast. Because if you're looking at one log and it says 4 p.m. and you're looking at another log and you're trying to find on another system where they access that at 4 p.m. and that system is in a different time zone and it's actually at 6 p.m., you're never going to find it. It's going to be really hard to do. Okay. Archiving and accessibility. Define log retention policies and implement them. How long am I going to log them or store them for, right? Make sure the important part is available for analysis. So if I log them, can I access them? Create backups. There we go. Now, monitoring and alerting. Create alerts and notifications for important and noteworthy cases. So when things certain things happen, create an alert. When certain things happen, alert me on it, because I don't have time to literally sit there and watch every log all day long, right? Focus on actionable alerts and avoid noise, meaning try and reduce those false positives if you can. Security. Protect logs by implementing access controls. So who has access to the logs? How do they access them? That's the access controls. Implement encryption if required. I would say implement encryption anyway. Don't implement if required. Implement anyway, because you don't want someone getting a hold of your security logs. Use dedicated log management solution. Okay. Continuous change. Logging source type messages are constantly changing, being updated. Be open to continuous change. This is one thing right here I see all the time. These people stand these up they have a consultant come in or whoever come in and stand these up, and then 10 years later it's the same exact system. Make sure you're updating. Make sure you're changing those log ingestion sources. Make sure you're changing the formats if you need to. Make sure you're reviewing them, because what happens is 10 years goes by, that company's totally different. Are you still grabbing the correct logs? You don't know because you're not evaluating them. Now, here's the challenges: data volume and noise. This is exactly it. If you have so much volume of data that you can't actually weed through it, that's a problem, right? Some applications generate insufficient amount of logs. That's true. Some applications, because they're custom applications, their logging's terrible. And then some of them do the opposite. They generate a ton of logs. So you need to find that balance in there, right? System performance. Log collection can slow down systems performance. Systems are not, this is 100% not always state of the art. Some sensitive and ancient systems are impossible to touch. This is true. There's many times a system's been running for so long in the business, like, it's working, don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it, right? And you need to do something about that. Managing system and agent version updates. This is something where when you're actually trying to add agents to systems so that it can log certain things, right? You need to be able to update the agents, which are just little applications that run on the systems. You need to be able to update them and synchronize. It can be a lot. It can be hard. Having multiple data formats to deal with. If you're getting all this data from application logs, security logs, whatever, and it's all in different formats, you have to have a way to put it in one format. Otherwise, it's really hard to figure out. Parsing data, different data sources and formats is time consuming and error prone. That's a big one, right? Ensuring data security is a task in itself. Analysis, combining, correlating, and analyzing data from multiple sources to understand the context. Okay, analysis. Archiving this in real time is another challenge. Avoiding false positives. That's the biggest one. Avoiding false positives. Because I can't tell you how many times people have looked at logs and been like, okay, here's the problem. And then you go and you start digging deeper and you're like, no, it's not. Like, you just went off this one thing. That's a false positive. You need to validate all that and then get rid of those false positives. Here's a big one: lack of planning, lack of financial resources, lack of implementation scenarios, playbooks, exercises, lack of technical skills to implement, focus on log collection instead of analysis. Here you go. This is a big one: ignoring human factors and system errors. So your team is working on policies to decide which logs to be stored, which of the given logging principles would be implemented and improved, archiving and accessibility. And then your team is implementing, in this case, which of the given difficulties occurs, and that's process and archive. Okay, lastly, let's go to common mistakes and practices. This is the common issues, right? Okay, experience. Log analysis nightmare due to improper log configuration, blah, blah, blah. If you ever think about how important to reconfigure, update, or test existing logging configuration is, please consider the real-life experience faced by millions. This is a real-life situation. Storyline. Microsoft Windows 7 default configuration provided zero, and the system is compromised with Eternal Blue, meaning there was no logging, so there was nothing you would see. That's true. So how would you see that? You'd have to have other logging sources, otherwise you would have no idea that someone's on there. Damage was full access to the system. It was a CVS score. Microsoft Windows 7 SP1 security patch 1 official support date ends in 2020. Okay, the exploit was discovered and used in the wild in 2017. So you can see it didn't have very long. The biggest thing here is it doesn't provide any logging. So if you don't have other log sources that would have indicated that something is awry, you would 100% miss this, and someone would just be in your environment, right? So now here is, first, you should use consulting service if you're short on time. That's exactly what I was saying, is this happens a lot. Mistakes, don'ts. Log sensitive information. Do not do that. Don't accidentally log social security numbers, PII, any of that stuff. Creating logs by yourself. Having uncollected logs, meaning you're creating logs, but you're not using them to ingest anything. That's a waste of time. Collecting everything, but not analyzing. So just because you're collecting stuff, if you're not analyzing it, you're doing nothing. Having systems that lack the plan required, skipping the scale, focusing on edges, skipping the internal systems, skipping the scale, testing, and functional. That's a big one, right? If you're skipping steps in this process, you're just wasting time, because it's gonna bite you in the butt at the end. Forgetting the process that takes the form of proper planning, management, and analysis. Okay, searching for what you want to find and not investigating what you see. That's a big one. I see that all the time. Someone says, hey, I saw this. It's weird. I think this is it. And they start deep diving into it, and that's not it. But it's like police when they're trying to investigate something and they think they have the suspect. They're going to hone in on that. They're not going to focus on the rest of it. And that's something that you need to get your head out of. Oh, man. Okay, now here's the do's. Create suitable log configuration plan according to your system. Secure your logs. That's a big one. Exclude logging sensitive information, which is obvious, but that one. Create meaningful alerts. Focus on having insights. Train your analysts. Update, maintain your operations plans, components. So, as a consultant, you're doing comprehensive tests. What would you call this? A mistake or practice? You're doing a comprehensive risk assessment. Notice that one of the development teams implemented a custom script to generate logs for an old system, which omits logging at some phases. That's a mistake, right? They wouldn't have created a custom script to log stuff and accidentally leave stuff out. That was a mistake, right? So that's a mistake. So now conclusion, we just finished log operations. This is a very easy box, obviously, because you just click continue, whatever. But it's something you guys should really take into consideration because this is the foundation. This is where if you don't build this correctly, your threat hunting goes down, your actual investigations goes down, everything goes down, right? So you may get into a company and they say, okay, have fun. And you're like, well, we're not logging crap. We don't know what we're doing. This is where you need to have that foundation. You need to build off this. Don't take this room for granted. I see a lot of people take these rooms where they are just click-through rooms, and they just take them for granted. They don't pay attention, whatever. Just don't do that. Pay attention, focus, and hopefully this helps you guys. Hopefully you guys learn something and build a foundation that works for you guys. Thanks.